Hello, algebra students. You know what my favorite thing is? It's when I can teach you just one skill that doesn't take long to master, but yet it can give you lots of points on your GED math test. The skill that we're going to look at in these four different varied problems, is the same one and shows up all over the place and is so useful. Let's go ahead and take a look. First problem says, evaluate 2ab squared minus ab plus 3a squared b. And before you say, hey, Kate, you're a jerk. You said this was going to be simple. That looks disgusting. Read the rest of it. It says for a equals -3. They're telling you a is -3. And b equals -7. And they're telling you what b is. Guys, this is not some mystery algebra equation that you need to solve. This is just straight up some math to do with some numbers, and they told you what the numbers are. All you have to do is trade out those letters for their known values. That's called substitution. And then it won't be algebra anymore. It'll just be arithmetic. I mean, ugly arithmetic, but hey, we have a calculator. And turns out that skill, that substitution, even that can happen in your calculator. Now, this is one of those shortcuts that I don't like to teach alone, though, because the skill of substitution by hand is super important for college. So I am going to do each one of these two ways. I will do it by hand, and then I will do it in my calculator so you can look at either example. You don't have to watch me do them all, okay, you guys? You can use that forwarding through the video to get to the part you need. But let's start this first one by doing our substitution by hand. So really good wisdom principle in algebra class is whatever equation or expression you're starting with, copy it down exactly the way you see it, especially since when you go to take your GED test, it's going to be on the screen. And you guys make a lot more errors if you don't have it right above you as you do your substitution step. So I'm just going to copy down the original expression. And now I'm going to do my substitution by hand, trading out those letters for their known values. Now the number 2 won't change. And this is what I mean about having it right above me. I'm looking above me for what to do. There was a 2 up there. There's a 2 down there. Next thing I had in this expression was a. Well, according to this, a is -3. So I'm going to replace it with a -3. Notice how I put that in parentheses because it's all shoved up against 2. It's multiplying. Now, a isn't the only thing I know. I also know what b is. B is -7. Super important to use parentheses here because of this square. So we have -7 being squared. Make sure that little floating 2 goes outside the parentheses or you will actually get a wrong answer. Next thing was a minus. I put a minus. Next thing is an a. And that a and b are shoved together, plus they're multiplying. So I'm just going to put them both in parentheses, okay? The a value and the b value. So a is -3, b is -7. Next thing we saw in the expression after the a and the b was a plus. So I'll put a plus, and a 3. So I'll put a 3. I always say when you don't know what to do in algebra, you just look up. Now the next thing was an a squared. So I will put a in parentheses. That was -3. I'll put the square on the outside. And then I'll put the b in parentheses as well. And that was -7. Okay, and now this is obviously tricky. There were lots of opportunities to drop parentheses, put the square in the wrong place, drop negative signs. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenging substitution for my experienced students, but I have faith in you. And now I'm going to just type the entire expression. And now look at it. No letters left. It's not algebra. It's just ugly arithmetic. And yeah, there's some exponents, there's some order of operations, there's some negatives, things that can make arithmetic more challenging, but our calculator, we will always have our calculator in order to do this type of simplifying. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to type the entire expression into the calculator exactly the way I see it, guys, including those parentheses. So 2 times -3 times -7 squared minus, and I will use the parentheses again, -3, close parentheses, open them to multiply by -7 plus 3, open parentheses, -3, close parentheses, square, open parentheses, -7. Woo! And we get -504. Now, like I said, I think this is a valuable skill, this skill of substitution, because it is one of the most basic skills of algebra. So if you continue with algebra at all in any context, so it could be college, it could be tech school, it could be helping your kids with their homework. Substitution is that like super base skill. So I like to do it by hand, but good news, we can do it in the calculator too. Here's how. So you might say, well, Kate, I already did it in the calculator. We did the simplifying in the calculator, this portion, but you can also do the substitution in the calculator so that you don't even have to write this down. And so here's how. The first thing you want to do is store any known values. So I know this value. I know that -3 is A, and I'm going to communicate that to my calculator. I'll type in the number first, -3. I'm going to hit the store button. I'm telling my calculator to save this piece of information, what -3 is, and then I click this variable button until I get to the proper variable, in this case, A. And then I press enter to store it. Now my calculator has stored -3 as the A value. Let me do the same thing for the B value. So -7, let's store that as B. Press enter to select. And now you can type in the original expression into your calculator and it will do the substitution for you. So 2A. Now here's the main reason I wanted to make sure I did this one with you guys, because if I press this button again, look what happens. My A changed. So how do I deal with that? So let me keep clicking until A comes back. There it is. Arrow to the right, and then when you press it, it'll start a new letter. So there it is, 2AB squared minus A, and then I'll arrow again so I can get a B, and then I can add 3A squared B. Woo! And press enter, and look at that. I get the same answer, -504. And actually, just a note to you guys before I move on, I was about to move on, but I don't want to do it without telling you. Anytime you have a expression with an exponent and you're plugging a negative into that exponent, I recommend you use your calculator for the substitution, because you guys make a really common error of forgetting parentheses when you do that, and then you actually get wrong answers. So it's just a good time to use your calculator for the substitution. So here's another great example of that. You can see that I have an exponent and a negative number. So it would be wise to use your calculator, at least to check your work. But I am going to do it by hand first, and then I'll do my calculator. So let me write out my original expression, 13 minus x squared all over x. And now, wherever I see an x, I'm going to substitute in the known value of -3. So 13 won't change, minus won't change, but -3 is going to replace x. Now, notice this x is being squared. You must put negative values in parentheses when you're substituting them in to exponential expressions. Okay, so if there's a power there, it needs to be in parentheses. And that's going to be over. This x also turns into -3. Now, again, you can do all this math up here in your calculator. Now that you've substituted in, you can do the entire simplification in it. And I'm going to as well to remind you to type the n/d key first when you have a big ugly fraction like this. And just a side note, guys, if your fraction bar doesn't look nice and horizontal like this, like yours is diagonal, you need to change your modes. You're in the wrong mode. You're in classic mode when you need to be in math print mode. So arrow down to math print, press enter to select it, clear to get out of the screen, and you'll have the right kind of fraction bar. And let's see. So let's type this in here. So I'll get 13 minus, open up my parentheses so I don't make that common student error, put the negative inside the parentheses and the exponent outside the parentheses. And then I can arrow down to the bottom of my fraction and put -3 down there. And I get -4/3. Now, a lot of you guys are uncomfortable with fractions, but this is one I would not want as a decimal because look, it's a long, ugly repeating decimal. Others of you are just uncomfortable with this fraction because you don't like that the top is bigger than the bottom. We call that an improper fraction, probably because your third grade teacher gave you like a fear of improper fractions, but we use them all the time in algebra, guys. This thing's done. This thing is perfectly fine answer. It is simplified. There's nothing you need to do here. -4/3 is what you get when you simplify this expression. Of course, we could have done it in our calculator by storing -3 as the x value, press enter, and then typing in the expression. I'll still use a fraction bar, but this time when I type in the expression, I'm going to use the letter, let my calculator do the substitution. And look at that, -4/3 that way as well. Next example, evaluate the function for x is equal to 5.1. And we see this function this time, y is equal to -0.2 times the quantity of x squared minus 74 plus x. You might say, Kate, this lesson was not about evaluating functions. It was about evaluating expressions, and we haven't even learned what a function is yet, and I think you're a jerk. And that's fine. You can be mad at me all you want. But for my experience level students, I need you to know that this same skill that we're using comes up in more complex situations, because this particular function here is an equation. See the equal sign? That's why I'm saying that. An equation here is just two expressions equal to each other. So there's an expression on the left-hand side and an expression on the right-hand side. So if I know any values, once again, I can plug them in where they belong and I can simplify that expression, that side of the equal sign. And indeed, I do know some values. According to this problem, I know what x is. X is 5.1. So anywhere where I see x, I can plug in 5.1. Let's do it. So my y won't change, my equals won't change, my -0.2 won't change, and neither will my parentheses. But I see an x value. X is not a mystery. X is known. X is 5.1. Now, since it's an exponential expression, I'm just going to use parentheses. It wouldn't actually matter in this case since it's not negative, but good habit. I won't lose my square. I won't lose my minus or my 74, close parentheses, plus. See why I say when you get lost in algebra, you just look up? I'm just copying what's right above me. But x is not a mystery anymore. I can replace x with that known value of 5.1. Wonderful. And now once again, you can see that on the right-hand side of the equal sign, this whole expression has no letters in it. So careful, you're not going to type the y equals in your calculator. You don't put entire equations in your calculator, but you can simplify expressions. So each side is an expression. So in this case, I can see this expression will simplify. Let's do it. -0.2, open up parentheses, open up another parentheses, 5.1. Close the parentheses around 5.1 in order to square it, then subtract 74, close parentheses before I add 5.1. And I get from this entire expression 14.698. And that is what y is equal to. So now I evaluated a function. I found y when I knew x in this particular relationship between x and y. A function is a type of relationship, and we'll learn about what the word means more in Unit 2, but you didn't really need to know much about it in order to just substitute in what you knew, do the math you knew how to do, and boom, that's the answer. All right. Now, of course, you could have done the entire thing in your calculator because you're so lazy, but I just want to show you if you do it in your calculator, the first part is going to be the same, of course, 5.1, store that in for x, enter. But the second part gets a little trickier because it's important that you know that we're not going to type the entire equation into our calculator, just an expression. And so this is what I'll type in. -0.2, open up parentheses, x squared. I'm letting my calculator do the substitution this time. Minus 74 plus x. And we can see that if we had gone that way, we would have gotten the same answer, 14.698. And just like before, we have to know that the equal sign stays steady and the left-hand side we haven't affected there. Strong mark, let's look at the next one. Is 2 1/4 a solution to the equation 3/4 times the quantity of 2p minus 6 equals -1 3/8? So I can get students to freak out with an example like this because it has fractions. You probably wouldn't have this exact problem on the GED test. What you're more likely to have is just this equation, and it says solve, and then there's some multiple choice answers, of which 2 1/4 is one of the possible solutions, and then you have some other numbers. And so I like this ability to just use substitution to check an answer, because what will often happen on the test is when you guys see fractions in equation, you'll freeze up and say, I don't know how to solve this because I don't know anything about fractions. So this is a nice skill to have, to know that you can just take these possible solutions, plug it in, and see if they work. Let me show you what I mean. So when I say, is 2 1/4 a solution to the equation, I'm saying, is that what P should be? And so, I mean, we could just plug that into the side where P is, in this case, the left-hand side, and see if we put that number in. If we evaluate it with 2 1/4, does it really give us -1 3/8? And then we don't have to solve this. We're kind of working backwards using simplifying. So let's do it. First, we'll do it by hand, and then we'll do it in our calculator. Again, important that you only deal with an expression at a time. So I'm going to deal with the expression on the left-hand side. 3/4 times 2. Now this 2 and this P are shoved together, so I'm going to open up a new parentheses, and I want 2 1/4 in there. Now, if you know the decimal version of 2 1/4, you can write that as well. You'll get the same answer as I do, okay? But I don't want to add any extra skills into this. So I'm just going to put 2 1/4 there in parentheses. Notice I closed my parentheses for 2 times 2 1/4. And then I'm going to subtract 6 and then close that parentheses. And again, I'm not guessing or memorizing. I'm looking up above me. It said -6 close parentheses. I write -6 close parentheses. And now I'm not going to write the other side because I actually don't know what it's equal to. That's what I'm testing. I'm testing if this left-hand side is going to give me -1 3/8. Well, let's take a look. N over D to type in the fraction, 3/4. Make sure you arrow out of the fraction before you open up the parentheses for 2. Open up the parentheses again to signal that you're multiplying. Now this is a mixed number, 2 1/4. And so I want the mixed number button here on my calculator, which looks like UN over D, kind of towards the top left. It's in green, so I hit the green second key, and then I can get UN over D and type in 2, arrow over 1/4. Again, I'll arrow out of my fraction before I close the parentheses and do, I was going to do negative, but I need to do -6, close parentheses, enter, and I get -9/8. Now, I did this one on purpose because it would just be really easy to assume, hey, they don't look identical. -9/8 is not identical to -1 3/8. They must not be the same. But they're actually 2 different forms of numbers. And so I would say make sure you get them in the same form before you determine if they're equivalent or not. This one is what we call a improper fraction. It's a fraction, pure fraction that's bigger than 1. You might say, of course it's bigger than 1. That's a 9 and an 8, Kate. No, I mean, like, what would 1 be in the case of eighths? 8/8 would be one whole thing, but I don't have 8/8. I have more than that. I have 9/8. So the top is bigger than the bottom. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's an improper fraction. This guy, on the other hand, is a mixed number. It's part whole number and part fraction. two different forms. So let's convert them into the same form before we decide whether or not they're equal. Here is a button right here on your calculator that will convert pure fractions, so n over d, into mixed numbers, u n over d. And so it is also in green. So I will hit the green second key and then hit that, and it's automatically going to pull up your last answer and say, you want me to convert it? And enter, I do want you to convert it. And we see that -9/8 is the same as -1 1/8. So now we can ask ourselves, since it's in the same form, is -1 1/8 the same as -1 3/8? No, it's not. We were right. Our suspicions were correct. This is not a solution to the equation. So if I was doing a multiple choice example, I could just rule this one out. It's not right, even if I forget how to solve equations, because I'm so scared of fractions. Not you, though. You won't be scared of fractions. Some other dude is scared of fractions, though. And you can think about him while you're testing. All right. Same thing, though, that you could just plug in to your calculator to have it do the substitution as well. But again, remember, you can only do one side at a time in your calculator. Another little trick to this one is that there is no P. Look at your variable button, X, Y, Z, T, A, B, C, and then it starts over. No P. So does that mean you can't use it for the substitution? No, you can use it. You're just going to have to pick a different letter. So instead of calling this P, I think I'll call it X to be lazy. So take that value that we're testing if it's a solution, 2 1/4. That is a mixed number. So I will use that U n over D again, 2 1/4, arrow out again so that I can store that. We said we would use X as the X value. And don't worry that it converted it to a improper fraction. It won't matter. Okay. Your calculator didn't break. 2 1/4 is the same as 9/4. It's fine. And now I will type in the expression on the right-hand side. Again, I can't type in the entire equation, but I can do the expression. So n over d, to type in 3/4, arrow out before I open my parentheses and type 2x. Make sure you use the same letter you chose before, -6. And we can see there that it is -9/8. And even if we had done it this way, we would have needed to convert it like we did before to see that, oh no, that's -1 1/8, not -1 3/8. This is not a solution. Nice. And this isn't even all the applications of evaluation, you guys. We're looking at 4 here. But in addition to this, you can do almost every geometry problem on the GED by substituting in the known values into the formulas. And so, I mean, this one skill, like literally, I couldn't teach you a skill that would give you more points than this one. Substitution is where it is at in algebra. All right, you guys, super proud of you. You're doing so well. I mean, honestly, you work through this unit at the experience level, you can be able to pass your GED. You're probably not going to need another unit if you really get it. So make sure you get this one. This one is crucial.